Friends, good morning to you all. It gives me a great pleasure to share a few thoughts about the book Bhuleshwar Shivalaya, authored by Dr. Kumud Kanitkar. Let me begin this review with two confessions. One, I have not seen the Bhuleshwara temple personally. My perception of the temple and its sculpture is entirely based on what Dr. Kumudji has illustrated and written in her book. Two, my understanding of the Natha and Yogini sects is too meager, and since the temple is believed to have been related to the Natha Sampradaya, my task is made even more difficult. However, I must state here that my purpose in this talk is to examine the veracity of some of the observations made by Dr. Kumudji. The book Bhuleshwara Shivalaya is the outcome of Dr. Kumud's highly inquisitive search for the temple's origins and renovation history, attribution, peculiarities, form, visual narratives from epics Ramayana and Mahabharata, and other possible sources, and meanings. The book is compact and bilingual. It addresses to both English and Marathi readership. I am extremely doubtful if the book will exceed 20 continuously typed pages in normal font. It is sumptuously illustrated. Almost every page of it has one or the other relevant drawing or photograph of or from the Shivalaya and close-ups, many of them highlighted with lines that point to what the author wants to the reader to see and reflect on. That is the merit of the book. And I must add, it carries the renowned archaeologist and art historian Dr. Arvind P. Jamkhedkar's weighty foreword full of insights. With these preliminary observations, let me vent my views on certain aspects of the things discussed in the book. Let me begin with the form of the Bhuleshwara temple. Dr. Kumudji suggests that the main shrine of Bhuleshwara must have been of Bhumija form. To me, she appears correct. The Pitha or pedestal mouldings of this temple correspond to medieval Nagara tradition of the Deccan. The systematic arrangement of the re-entrant cornered pillar-like components on wall again remind us of the Bhumija tradition. The plan is stellate, and this plan is found in other Bhumija temples such as Kopeshwara at Kedrapur and Chennakeshava at Belur. Dr. Kumudji adds the evidence of Bhadraka pillar forms with so-called people leaf motifs, a normal feature in Bhumija temples. For a comparison, I am showing here the famous Channakeshava temple at Belur, a stellate temple built by Hoysala Vishnuvardhana in 1116. This temple has no superstructure now, but in 1850s a photograph shows the temple with a brick superstructure of Bhumija order, probably Kamalodbhava subtype. A Bhumija temple is characterized by 1. A Nagarapitha or pedestal, 2. A Jangha or wall formed of heavy pillar-like systematically arranged components, and 3. A spire comprising of stories in Malika Krama, that is garland-like horizontally arranged kutas in stories. The Jangha part is often used for carving imagery. In the case of Bhuleshwara, though the superstructure is missing, its Bhumija form can be ascertained by the Pitha and Jangha details. You may see here the pedestal and Jangha details of the Channakeshava temple below. Bhuleshwara's plan probably would be stellate with 24 points. You may also see the resemblance between the pedestal of the Belur Janakeshwara temple and the Bhuleshwara temple. Please permit me to disagree with some of the identifications in the Ramayana panel illustrated on page 56. The central large pair of figures of Rama and Lakshmana acts as a divider between the incidents of Ramayana, one Balakanda and two Kishkindhakanda and Uttarakanda, Rama's coronation. Lower panel on our right has two scenes beginning from our left. One, Putrakameshti, and two, Sita with attendants engaged in worship of Shiva. Let me reflect upon the first scene, namely the Putrakameshti episode. Here we are seeing the following from our left to right. A. Dasharatha and Kausalya receiving payasa from Yajna Purusha. Notice the royal attire of both figures. Kausalya is gently touching Dasharatha's hand. In our rituals, the wife of the Yajamana is asked to touch him as a mark of the involvement of both in the ritual. Similarly, when prasada is to be received, both Yajamana and his wife are supposed to receive it together, as shown here. B. This is Rishishringa in the attire of a rishi, slightly damaged. He holds a small linga in his left hand, while his right hand is raised in a gesture suggesting victory or success of the event. C. The figure in between is damaged, but it certainly would have contained the figure of Yajna handing over the pot of payasa to Dasharatha. There is one more related figure to the left of Dasharatha Kaushalya pair, about which we will remark in the next slide. D. There is a pair of elephants with riders to the right of Dasharatha Kausalya pair. This probably is related to the announcement of success of Dasharatha's Putra Kameshti in Ayodhya, or more likely the birth of sons to Dasharatha. Let us turn to the second scene in the composition. Here we have a royal female figure seated in front of a linga-like object covered with seeds. The object is placed between two columns of pots. This may be identified as Sahasralinga. Such representations of Sahasralingas are known from Vijayanagara period. She is obviously engaged in its worship. Behind her stand four ladies with ritual materials in hand. Above the linga is a wheel cart with a bow placed on it. This helps us identify the seated female figure as Sita and the four female figures behind her as her attendants. Janaka had declared that he would give Sita in marriage to the hero who would string Shiva's bow inherited from his ancestors. Her destiny was therefore dependent on Shiva's bow. So she is engaged in Shiva's worship, praying for the day of arrival of her hero. I must say here that the inclusion of the scene of Sita worshipping Sahasralinga has twofold significance. One, it shows the version probably propounded in narrative discourses of Ramayana conducted in the Bhuleshwara temple. And two, it demonstrates the ingenuity of the artist in imagining such a scene not found in the Ramayana. Next is the third scene shown in the upper panel. It depicts Sita Swayamvara. I have nothing to add to what Dr. Kumud has identified. except that the men on pair of camels beating drums possibly are announcing the marriage of Sita and Rama or its fruition. Just for the sake of comparison, I am showing here the scene of Sita Swayamvara as imagined by a Hoysala artist. The depiction is from the Kakshasana of Amriteshwara temple at Amritapuram in Karnataka, dated to 13th century. The next or fourth in sequence is the pair of two large princely figures in dialogue at the center stage of the panel, representing Rama and Lakshmana. Dr. Kumud considers this as the argument between Rama and Lakshmana about the validity of Kaikeyi's insistence on Rama leaving for Vanavasa. However, I feel that this is the post-Sita abduction scene. Rama is probably explaining to Lakshmana the reliability of Hanuman, who approached them in the guise of an ascetic. The scene provides link directly to Kishkinda Kanda episodes depicted in the panel to our left side. The next scene, number 5, represents the episode of Hanuman meeting Rama and Lakshmana in the guise of an ascetic at the instruction of Sugriva. The man with folded hands is Hanuman, as suggested by his mace. Also compare the dress of Lakshmana with that of Hanuman with folded hands. The seated person with a sword in hand to the right of Sugriva is probably his guard, not Lakshmana. Dr. Kumut's identification of the sixth scene, found in the lower panel, is probably correct. Rama is swearing on his sword. The last two figures are apparently Rama and Lakshmana. Look at their kundalas. This is for the sake of comparison how the Hoysala artists have detailed the visual narrative. These are from Amriteshwara temple at Amritapura. We have four sequential compartments showing 1. Rama and Lakshmana meeting Jatayu, and 2. Hanuman, and 3. Sugriva with Hanuman meets Rama and Lakshmana, and 4. Vanaras showing the jewelry of Sita. The seventh scene is identified by Dr. Kumud as Rama and Sita in Panchavati guarded by Lakshmana. Here, Rama and Sita are seated on thrones attended by two female fly-whisk bearers. I would prefer to identify this as the culminating scene of the story, namely coronation of Rama on the throne of Ayodhya after return from Lanka. Otherwise, it is difficult to explain the female fly-whisk bearers at Panchavati. Overall, I feel that this single panel of Ramayana is intelligently devised by the artist to convey synoptically the story beginning with birth of Rama and ending with his return to Ayodhya, overlooking certain major episodes like abduction of Sita, Sundarakanda and Yuddhakanda events. I am getting a doubt in my mind if the emphasis here is on the importance of Shiva Puja, with some figures holding linga in their hands. I do not know if it has to be identified as a Pashupata Kalamukha attribute. Kalamukha priests are known to have worshipped a small linga placed on hand, as seen in a depiction from Kedareshwara temple at Belligame, Karnataka. This panel depicts Rama killing Maricha and Ravana deceiving Sita. I agree with the identifications of Dr. Kumut in this particular panel. This panel clearly depicts Samudra Manthana scene, again showing the creative skill of the artist. In this panel, all gods are on the tail side of Vasuki, and the head side is held by Asura king Bali alone. He is shown seated in palace. Dr. Kumud has identified all the figures in the panel correctly. Dr. Kumud says that in this depiction, Bali is sitting in his palace casually holding the hood of Vasuki with his left hand and with his back to the Banthana process. But perhaps we can have a different view of this scene. When Devas, as a psychological trick, deliberately held the head side of Vasuki for churning the ocean at the beginning, Asuras objected and insisted on holding the head side. The fiery heat emitted by Vasuki exhausted the Asuras. The scene here possibly depicts the exhausted Bali, representing the whole Asura community, being comforted by his wife Vindhyavali and three lady fly whisk bearers. An issue raised by Dr. Kumud about these narrative panels is about their purpose. She thinks that these panels were deliberately carved under instruction of the Acharya as educative devices. The purpose of visual narratives appears to be reminding the episodes of epic story to the devotee as part of inculcating dharma and abandoning adharma. A person can understand visual narrative only if he already knows the story and its episodes. As such, it would be better to assume that these are reflections of the discourses held on epic episodes by an acharya in the temple as part of the activity. But ultimately, they do fulfill the purpose of education to a devotee by repeatedly reminding him about the essence and morals. Among the Lokapalas identified in Junabai temple by Dr. Kumudji, one is seated on a lion. This is identified by her as Kubera. In known iconographic examples, Kubera's Vahana is a goat and rarely a human figure. But the Lokapala seated on a lion is regularly found in many examples of Jaina Lokapala configurations on ceilings and uncommonly on Manastamba pedestals. In Mahalakshmi temple complex at Kolhapur, the ceiling of small mandapa has a Lokapala configuration in which a Lokapala is seated on lion. I am reproducing here a Lokapala figure on lion from the Manastamba pedestal at Huncha, dated to 10th century. Against these observations, it is worthwhile to verify whether Junabai temple is originally of Jaina dedication. The images of Natha Munis very rarely find a place in iconographic program on 12th century temples. I am reproducing here a couple of sculptures of what seem to represent Matsyendranath. Both are from the Kankaleshwara temple at Bede, which could be a Yadava monument of 12th century. In my view, this may be taken as evidence of frequent participation of itinerant Natha Sampradayas in the Deccan. Though they themselves may not have taken up temple erection projects, their impact on Shaiva circles may have been strong enough to allot iconographic space to revered Natha gurus such as Matsyendra. I was told that there are images of different Natha gurus of uncertain date on the beams of Bhuleshwar. If this was a Natha temple, then one would expect their figures on temple wall. After 14th century in Karnataka, diminutive images of Nath Siddha Munis figure on temple pedestals. For instance, on the Narsimha temple in Swarnavalli Matha at Sondan near Sirsi in Uttar Kannada district, there are images of Nathas. But this is a Smarta Matha of Shankaracharya Sampradaya. In late and post Vijayanagara period, the Natha Sampradaya activities were patronized in southern Karnataka, particularly by the Gaudas. For instance, Suttur Matha near Mysore was one such Matha patronized by the Gaudas. One of the questions raised by Dr. Kumud in her book is about the role of Acharya in devising imagery and narratives for the benefit of the sadhaka. I think to a great extent she may be right. In agamic sects, Guru has the highest place of reverence, next only to God. As such, his role in molding the sadhaka devotee would be great. We have instances in 10th-13th century Karnataka in which Kalamukha Gurus maintained their own architects who created monuments and imagery under their guidance. I give an instance of one such architect from the Trikuteshwara temple at Gadag. The Trikuteshwara temple at Gadag was a Kalamukha temple. To the south of it stands a Saraswati Mandapa and a Matha beside it. The Saraswati Mandapa was erected by an architect named Udaga, who claimed to be a disciple and architect working under his Kalamukha teacher Kriya Shakti Pandita. Normally, Saraswati Mantapas, which almost invariably form part of Kalamukha Matha complex, are very simple and plain structures. But this monument is unique in sculptural detail with meticulous carvings on pillars, kakshasana, pedestal, and walls. For contrast, the Saraswati Mandapa attached to the Kedareshwara temple at Pelligame is also illustrated here. This slide shows the inscription on the wall of the Saraswati Mandapa at Gadag, praising Udaga, the architect disciple of Kriya Shakti Pandita Deva. I have not touched upon several other things discussed in the book by Dr. Kumudji for the simple reason that I have nothing new to say about them. Overall, I find that the book is an experiment of sorts. It has detailed the history of the monument, described the monument in various dimensions, attempted to identify narratives meticulously, and tried to attach meanings to the temple and its imagery. I hope that similar studies of temples would emerge in future, helping us to comprehend our temples better. I congratulate Dr. Kumudji on this excellent work. Friends, that is all what I have to say about the book Bhuleshwara Shivalayam at present. I thank you for your patient hearing. Thank you once again.
Now, I thank you so much, Dr. Padigar, for your very enlightened and important insights into quite a few things. And this, in spite of not being able to see it because of the COVID. I am going to follow with a video I had prepared for today's session, which included which includes all the things that were omitted in the book. For I simply had to end it somewhere, and I must tell you that I found after the my video prepared video is prepared PowerPoint is shown. In the meantime, I'll get those two images again. I think it is brilliant the way he has spotted the what he has identified as Sita and the Dhanusha on a cart above it. I'll show you that picture after my PowerPoint is finished. And I think I also had totally missed the linga in Rishishunga's hand and his gesture, sort of not perhaps blessing, perhaps in a way celebrating that this has come to fruition, and the gesture of Kaushalya touching Dashratha's arm, which I had missed. So I've asked Dr. Padigar whether I could just print a small corrigendum sort of thing to be added to the unsold copies and to send it to the people who have already been sent the copies, at least on the email, because it should be. I mean, that was the whole purpose of publishing it when the book, even when I wasn't ready. So I can talk to him later and find out if he's okay with that idea. Now I have the Samudra Manthan, the reason why Bali is shown alone. His interpretation is very valid. That he was probably, the Asuras had probably given up and he was the only one and he was tired. And this signals the end of the Samudra Manthan, that they have finally acquiesced defeat. Then I just want both Vijay and Amol to if you have missed it, I'll send you the details again of the mathas, Vijayanagar, post Vijayanagar mathas and shrines where nathas are depicted. And he also mentions, in reference to Velankar's this Bead Kankaleshwar temple, that depiction on the an appreciation or acknowledgement of his contribution rather than have any direct participation. And I totally I agree with that. And I must thank Dr. Padigar for being so prompt and so detailed in his observations. And whatever we disagree upon, I will talk to him separately, because these are not narrative panels just for narration. That is why I would point out that in Mahabharata, there is a small episode depicted where Yudhishthir lives with Nakul and Sahadev. Now, that is not, why would that be, why would that episode be important? Because the Acharya is trying to tell people how different people react differently and how their hands are forced by circumstances. Now, here is a case where Draupadi Swayamvar, the Pandavas had gone incognito and people did not know that they had survived the Lakshagriha fire. And they wanted to keep that a secret. Now, here was Arjun who had just won Draupadi, and there was the kings were all protesting, and Bhim, as was his wont, has uprooted a tree, made it into a club, and he is there to protect him. Now, if people saw, along with these two, if people saw one set of older looking brother, they would put the five together and realize that these are Pandavas. So, in the interest of keeping their a secret, Yudhishthir very quietly left with the twins. Now, this is not a palayan. This is a tactic that was required to keep their secret. It is for the same reason that Balaram and Sri Krishna episode is also shown there. Krishna had already understood that these are Pandavas. He was very happy that his aunt Kunti was alive and her kids were alive, and yet he knew the importance of keeping the secret. So he only sent Balarama a signal. He didn't say anything, and it is for this reason that he intervened afterwards and got the kings to stop sort of opposing Arjuna and Bhima. They didn't know they were Arjuna and Bhima. Anyway, so let me just request Riddhi to start with the PowerPoint. I have tried to put in whatever was missing in the book. So there are and I would very much appreciate the opinion of both Dr. Padigar and Acharya Umapati Stapati, who is also a sculptor. That means he works with his hands. So I feel that there is a Karnata influence in the style. And this is relevant to me because I want to be responsible for the first restoration. And I'm also, I mean, it is all confusing because the Natha images are also part of this. So let me finish this. Please look at this one small explanatory note about the last Zoom meet. And I had presented the conjecture that this was conceptualized and built by early Natha Sampradaya. That early is important, and the both scholars Rachi Dhere and M.R. Joshi emphasize that the Natha's genuine desire was to make theological knowledge and the method of sadhana accessible to masses who did not know Sanskrit, were not even literate. Now, this was late. This the best way of doing this. And remember, this stylistically, this temple can be between 1100 1150 at the latest. And this was the time it was Mukundanath had published his Viveka Sindhu only in 1188. There was still 50 years before it was published. And Naneshwar, of course, 1219 Naneshwari. That means the literacy which was required to read whatever was written, even in Marathi, this is before that. And here, the only language, I've said that I'm just quoting this Shabdevina Samvadu. That is how the been the episodes are chosen to, because with a purpose, that means to illustrate what the acharya is trying to convey. Dharma in the sense of acharana. Dharma in the sense of acharana. And therefore there are no Puranic stories. Not a single, it's a Shaiva temple and there are no Puranic stories on the Janga. Only Surasundaris and musicians. And there are 5 Devakoshas which are empty, unfortunately. But I imagine one of them must have had Mahishasura Mardini, because Nathas, Hingalaja, and they do worship or venerate Mahishasura Mardini. So, based on these visual proofs, I have said that this was a Natha. Next, please. Riddhi. Riddhi, can you go to the next?
Yes, ma'am, it has been changed.
Ah, okay, thanks. So this is again, I have already said that this was 1188 and 1290, and this is much before that. This is early 12th century. And many Natha Siddha images have been added during restoration. Now, I would think that only a Natha related or a Nath, whoever restored it venerated the Nathas. Otherwise, why would he add the Natha image? This is the conjecture that it originally was a Natha and somehow the restorers knew it and therefore they have added their own bit. And I also realized that Natha Sampradaya, for it to go pan India, it had to have a common language since it did not want Sanskrit. And I just talked to Dr. Zamketkar this morning, and he said Apabhransha should be investigated. So that is something Amol and Vijay can follow up. That there must be, uh, because for any sampradaya to become successful or spread, you need two things. You need a Daivata, identified Daivata. Of course, this is Shiva Shakti together, that is Daivata. You also need a Pramana Grantha. That means you need to have, like you would have a Bible or a Quran or a Gita or a Gnaneshwari for the Varkaris. So you have to have a Pramana Grantha, and then you have to have the sadhana mode. Like the Varkaris, their Samohik Upasana is through the Vari. So these three things are essential, and I think this temple represents something that happened much before all this had been achieved. And I've just added a note that, I mean, this is the fact that this is why the Zoom meetings are there. That if what I presented did not appeal to Bankar or Sarde or Dandekar, fine, because what they are looking at are the later temples, and again only with depictions of nathas and depiction of the asanas. And the nathas, the hagiography must have developed later, because nathas do not, because they are humans, so they have no they have, there is no way for us to identify them. Therefore only the legends which add to their lanchana help us identify. Matsyendra has the Matsya, and similarly, so this probably had not yet developed, and that was my contention. Next, please. Okay, so what the today's PowerPoint covers is the Nandi Mandapa pillars, which were not covered before. Nandi Mandapa also, I feel, is not of the original shrine. It was added later. There are many reasons, because it is the staircases, both sides of the Nandi Mandap. They are definitely not the kind of access that would be provided for a temple which was expected to be visited by people. And there are, the mandap above has friezes which have images and which show that they are not originally from here, and some of them are disfigured. Now obviously, so far high up, and I mean, iconoclast would not go for such high up images of relatively unimportant already been there somewhere and they have been assembled here. That is number one, Nandi Mandap. Then I'm showing stairs on both the sides, and where the stairs reach that Nandi Mandap, those pillars only, their pillars are also different style, definitely different style, and they have depictions of Ganesha, for example. Ganesha is not depicted on the Janga. Of course, no god is depicted, but Ganesha does not appear on the Janga, but he appears here on the pillar base, and that also indicates that it's a different style. And the Adhisthana images, which are a standard form for any most of the Shiva temples, are goddesses. They're all goddesses in the conventional way. Like Brahmani is shown with three faces and the lanchana expected of her. Lakshmi is shown with her own lanchanas. And there are one quadrant only has some Surasundaris, and there is only one male, and that is the image of Bhairava. And then I have just given a quick refresher for the triadic panels, and I have included the Natha Siddha images. So let us go to the next one. This is the Nandi Mandap. Now you can see that it has many different types of pillars, and none of them match the Mandapa pillars, which are part of the original shrine. One of the points I make, that the pillars are different, indicating a different set of guild of architects working on it. Next. These are the friezes above the Nandi Mandap. Also, there is a window at the back, a small window, which allows because it's on the east on the east wall, it allows the sun's rays to enter the Garbhagruha. Only thing is the Nandi has his neck turned a bit to allow the sunlight to fall directly on the. Now this kind of via media would not have been required if the Nandi Mandap was original, if the Nandi was there originally. But apart from that, look at the frieze above on the beam. See, everything that is extraneous is on the beams. Whatever was original has been destroyed, and it has been restored with the help of beams. And the beams are from somewhere else. Now, here you can see that these are gods. The local assistant calls it Indra Sabha, because you do have the Vahanas, and you can see Brahma is there. You can see the Shruk in his hand and the Poti in his hand. You can see Indra, because the elephant is carved there and he has a Vajra, and so on. These are the gods, and some cases east beam, west face. Next, please. This is the west beam, and you can see the guard standing there. That is the entrance to the temple, the Garbhagruha. And these are musicians, and also a goddess is there. You can't quite identify her. Next, please. This is another goddess. You can see the book, perhaps the book in her left hand. But other than that, they are mostly the musicians. And again, this is way high up, and their heads, I mean, they have been broken or vandalized. Now, unlikely that, it's likely that they were collected from somewhere in this form and then reused. Next, please. And this is the south beam. Here, the central Devi is probably Saraswati, because you can see the Veena in her right hand and you can see the Pustaka in her left. And again, a lot of musicians attending. Next, please. Now, about the stairs. The stairs are very steep, difficult, and they look like they're afterthoughts, because you can see the second photo. Mrs. Reddy and Amar's son, they are both standing on the two sides, two stairs that lead up. Now, the mandap, and also they have another set of stairs which bifurcate and they lead to the colonnade. Next, please. And at the entrance, where the steps end, you have these pillars I mentioned about. The pillars with their the first, that is the lowest section, has images, and this is a Ganesha. Then the second one, the second pillar I have shown with black arrows, it's from the other pillar. It perhaps looks like a Shaiva Dwarapal, I cannot be sure, but could be. Anyway, their styles, next please. Their styles are different. See, these are the other pillar bearing the images. I cannot identify really. Next please. And now this is another important aspect. One of the pillars, I haven't shown you here, but one of those pillars, the same kind that I have shown you just now with Ganesha, and has an image of Chamunda. This is on the pillar, which is on the right hand side. And the one on the left hand side is on the Janga Antarala of the main shrine. And they are different. Although they both show they are Vrushikodari. In one case, the tail of the Vrushiki is up, and in the other one, the left one, it is down. Apart, there is a difference in the style. On the Antarala image is standing on a probably a cadaver. I think so, because it's a man, but probably a dead man. Next, please. Similarly, the Bhairava, that is on the Antarada. It's a very Saumya kind of a Bhairava. You wouldn't, I mean, he does have fangs and all. But when you look at the one on the right, it is definitely a different style. And I feel that this has a southern sort of influence. And in the background, I have shown you the pillar, how it stands on the pillar on the south side of the Nandi Mandal. Next, please. And this is the Adhisthana Devatas. And you can see the leftmost on the top is Brahmani. Her usual attributes, three faces. The next to her is Saraswati. You can see the Veena. Next to her is Lakshmi. You can see Chakra Shankha, Gada and Padma. Whereas the one after her has a Gada but has a shield and has a Bija Puraka in her lower right hand. And then you have a Bhairava. Then other, I mentioned that there are 5 images of Surasundaris, or so you can see the lower panel. One is a Darpana looking in the mirror. The next one is intriguing, because if we are saying there is some connection, otherwise she is just a Vishakanya, I suppose. And then you have Mahishasura Mardini. And the last photo I have shown just so that you get an idea of the placement of these images. And you notice that the picture I've chosen has the Bhairava on the Jangha also. And the Bhairava on the Adhisthana is not exactly below him. It is to the one place displaced to the right. Next, please. And then just something about the triadic panels. I'm still in the dark about it, and I haven't been getting, my head is literally spinning with all the, yes, thank you, Amol, probably Mahalakshmi. This triadic panels. My head is still spinning from reading all the publications, galore, Alexis Sanderson, Mallinson, Bishop, but it doesn't really help me in any way. Next, please. So I'm just showing you what I have so far understood. Now this on the right, you have an illustration, the sketch that is from one of Alexis Sanderson's papers, which is based on the mandala and the agamic identity, and it is based on Abhinav Gupta's one of his depictions. Now you can see that this is, without knowing who they are, all I can say is the central goddess is larger and the two goddesses flank her. And what is described is that Para is the ultimate. Para is kind of Aghora, but not so much Aghora. That means she is middling. But the one on the Devi's left, to our right, Apara, is the malevolent one. You can see that she is malevolent. So I have, on the left hand side, I've shown you the Bhairavas. Bhairavas also, the 10th panel has Bhairavas. The central one is the main. The one on his right is relatively benign, because he is Bhairava, but he has Damaru, Trishula, and probably looks like a, panapatra or some sort of a cup, but not a skull cup. And the left one has not only a kapala, but it has a, in his upper, raised upper right hand, there is a sword, and his lower right hand there is a scimitar, and in his lower left hand there is a naramunda. So that means that benevolent and malevolent mixed, and only malevolent. That kind of a thing depiction is there, and that I cannot transfer to panel 7, panel 9. All I can say is that they tally in terms of the depictions. Panels. I have just shown you the panels. Next, please. When I show them together, you can understand what I'm saying. Like this one, for example, has Indrani. These vehicles are doubtful because the one of these things about the ancient architecture is they are very particular about symmetry. They will not have a panel where there are no vahanas and a panel where there are vahanas. So I have a feeling that these vahanas were later additions, whoever reconstructed and that is why they're also being erected like a hypaethral arrangement. Then panel 8 and panel the lowest panel is obviously a combined panel, and there are many things that support this view. So and the sadhaka is there. Next, please. Okay, these are the remaining panels. All of them have the same format. Central goddess is larger, one on the left, one on the right. They don't all have the we can Riddhi, we can take up the PowerPoint after after I finish. Umapati Acharya wanted to do that. Okay, so these are the panels, and this is something new because I'm always asking. Next, please. And these siddhas are they're not necessarily nathas because they don't have the natha hagiography, and I have a feeling that perhaps it had not been developed so definitively yet. I do not know, but these are the beams which have been placed on the dwarashaka, and they have all have three siddhas, all the same size, different gestures. Next, please. And the central figure is the mandapa pillar, and you can see that in the right pillar, the quarter pillar, half pillar, the dwarf pillar that you can see shows you where the Riddhi, can you use a pointer to the, you see where the two people are there above that that pillar, half pillar, dwarf pillar, above. Okay, there is no. Okay, those not the ones. I want the central photo, and I want the right part of the central photo. Ah, that right part of the central photo, right? That is a dwarf pillar. Ah, that. So to tell you where these images are located, they're above. They are part of the restoration. They are not part of the original. So then different places where you see them and different images that you see them, and the lower left, Riti, the lower left. This one is found next to the kunda, which is away from the, but the steps lead down to it and looks like a siddha. Next, please. Not necessarily a natha. Again, is not identifiable according to the natha. Perhaps Amol and Vijay can identify some of them, but I cannot. Next, please. Nagarjun to the top right is Amol and Vijay have both. That is probably Nagarjun, but this is Raseshwar Nagarjun, not the uh, original. I mean, the much older Nagarjun. And there are some lower one. The pillar has on the left an asana, which I think Vijay has identified or Amol has identified. I don't know the name. But the funny thing is on the right, that pillar Seems to have an animal face. I do not know whether it's an aberration. I have not been able to, climb up to that level and take a frontal depiction. Anyway, next, please. So, these top three are again a part of the images I see on the beams and the top of the pillars. Now, the lower one is interesting because that is obviously the Dwara Shakha had must have been splintered, and they have inserted this particular panel inside so that the lower half and the upper half would have actually been together originally in the intact. Please. Some more, some are standing, some have like I cannot interpret who they are. Like I said, Amol and Vijay could perhaps. Next, please. That's the end. Okay, I just want to thank everybody for contributing, and we have to understand so many different viewpoints. And I really hope that my original idea someday will materialize. That we all get together and visit Bhuleshwar, so that on site we can understand what we are all saying. So thank you all, and